and welcome to the 35th anniversary of the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. Who's having a great day so far? Sorry, I'm going to ask the question again because I want them to hear us in the cooking tent. Who is having an amazing time at the Classic so far? I love to hear that. I'm Leora Kulak with Food and Wine, and I am so honored to introduce Bubbles and Bites, featuring Lexus Master Sommelier Carlton McCoy and Bites from the St. Regis Resort in Aspen. Carlton is one of my favorite people. He is a master sommelier, and he is the wine director at the Little Nell, one of the youngest to ever receive this designation. He's also been listed on Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, so he's a pretty big deal. That's why he's one of my favorite people.
I love the voice.
Today's seminar will feature two of my favorite things, three if we're counting Carlton, bubbles and caviar. So you can't go wrong there right off the bat. We'll be tasting a series of champagnes and sparkling wines from around the world, paired with bites from the St. Regis Resort. Two of the three dishes, as you can see, have caviar from Calvisius Caviar. It is the largest farmed caviar producer with sustainable farms in northern Italy. Not a bad place to be. Before we get the seminar started, I just want to tell you to please fill out these cards in front of you so that you can receive the Paderno 2-blade spiralizer. And while you are on site at the Food and Wine Classic, please check out the Lexus LC Drive experience right here on Mountain Plaza. It's opened every day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and you can test drive the smoking hot Lexus LC 500. Have you guys seen this car? I know.
I heard it before I saw it.
It's pretty awesome. One of them might be missing, and it may or may not have been me. Because we're going to keep that comment secret, I also wanted to mention that this seminar is being broadcast live on Facebook to over 2 million Food and Wine followers. So after the seminar, you can feel free to go online, you can watch the seminar again, and you can even post it to your friends, to your page to make your friends jealous. So let them know that you are here and they were not. I know that we're all really eager to get this seminar started, to taste these wines, and to eat this incredible food. So without any further ado, let them hear us in the cooking tent. Please give a huge Food and Wine welcome to Carlton McCoy.
Well, good morning. So I'm going to start by saying I'm very impressed because I look around the room and I see a lot of faces that I saw floating around the Nell at 1:30, looking for another bottle of champagne, warming their palates up for this panel. So again, congratulations. This is where the pros are made. It starts on Saturday. Everyone's fine on Thursday. They can sort of figure it out on Friday, but by Saturday, if you can show up to that panel at 10 a.m. and drink champagne, then you're a pro. So one thing I want to do for housekeeping is say I'm not a big fan of sort of talking at people. I think everyone in this room is going to learn a lot more if there's questions. So please don't mind if you interrupt. Raise your hand, ask the questions. Champagne is something that I think people have been drinking forever. They drink a lot of, but don't fully, understand how it's made, the styles, the applications, things like that. So raise your hand. It's like school days. If you have a question, chances are there's 10 other people who are cowards who wouldn't ask the question. So raise your hand and ask the question for them as well. Okay, so we're gonna start this. Before we start talking about the champagne, actually, let's just have a quick little taste, huh? I just had my first taste of coffee. I'm not completely awake yet, so this is gonna help. All right, cheers, guys. To Lexus and to Aspen. All right, so first one I want to talk is before we get into the champagne, we're gonna talk about caviar. Okay, so who grew up eating caviar? Exactly. So caviar is obviously, a very, very luxurious ingredient, mainly because of the rarity of this phenomenal aged sturgeon fish. And in America, obviously, we've been eating it for a while, but only a very small percentage of us have been eating for a while. And we didn't grow up sort of liking this flavor profile, right? The whole idea in America of something that tastes fishy wasn't really ideal, but as we get older, we started eating things that we thought were weird, just like everything else. And then we start to differentiate between what's quality. So Calvisius Caviar is what you have in front of you. So what I want you to do is, I think they presented it incredibly well in this one little bite with the gelée and the caviar. So what you do is, while we talk about this caviar, just take that bite, okay? So what I would do is I would take half the bite of the gelée and all of the caviar, And don't just chew it, rub it on the top of your palate and sort of let it roll around. I love caviar. I absolutely adore caviar. So this is a great opportunity for me. I drink champagne all the time. I don't get to eat caviar all the time. So this is way cooler for me. And I get to eat I ate half this tin this morning. So, so one thing you really want to notice is, obviously with caviar, the first thing is you look at caviar and you notice the color. The gradients of color range anywhere from sort of light golden brown all the way to really like almost jade black. And the flavor profiles really coincide. The sort of lighter brown colors have nuttier, more high-toned sort of caramel notes, and the really sort of black, inky ones, stronger, more intense notes. I tend to have those with food, where the sort of brown caviars, as I like to call them, I simplify everything so I can understand it. I just have by themselves, typically eaten off my hand, right? So enjoy the texture, and then taste the first champagne. So before we even geek out and talk about technical notes, I want you to enjoy the pleasure of having caviar in the mouth and then a beautiful champagne. And then we can go into geek mode. So the great thing about Courvoisier's caviar is, one, obviously it's not pasteurized. People don't know this, but a lot of caviar that comes to the US is pasteurized. And just like with anything else, pasteurization rips out a lot of things, including the flavors that you pay a premium for. So that's really important to know when we talk about this caviar. This is naturally produced with very little amounts of salt. Hello, welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right. Come on in. Again, very little amounts of salt. And the thing about salt is, if you've ever had a dish by a very heavy-handed chef, I used to work with one of those where they use way too much salt, it essentially just burns your palate when you eat the food, right? You can't taste anything. So it's sort of this law of diminishing returns where you want to add enough salt so you can cure the eggs, but not too much where you can't taste the caviar. So we're in a great opportunity now. We can try all these different caviars side by side. This is one of the oldest farms, going back to the 70s in Lombardy in northern central Italy, which is phenomenal, and do it the right way. This massive tin is how they ship their caviar. So wouldn't you love to just, one of these just arrive, you wake up and you go outside to get your newspaper and this is sitting on the front stoop. Instead of the newspaper, you're like, I don't need to read about politics today, it was the same as yesterday. Kablam, someone else got arrested, cool. I'm eating caviar, I don't care. And you sit there with your spoon. We have a guest last night. This is a true story. I'm not making this up. I make up a lot of stories for laughs, but this is true. We had a guy last night, and he's a great wine client of ours. And he goes, Carlton, you know what I want? He goes, I went to France, and this guy turned me on to caviar on white bread. I go, what? I go, first of all, how did you find white bread in France? That's a luxury of the US. And last night, he ate 4 ounces of caviar on a slice of Wonder Bread. And I have, my best friend is a Hungarian guy. He's our director of food and beverage. He didn't know what Wonder Bread was. He goes, what is this Wonder Bread? It sounds amazing with the name. I go, well, yeah, that was the gimmick, right? Wonder Bread, who doesn't like Wonder Bread? So this guy sits there eating 4 ounces of caviar with his Wonder Bread, so he gets it. And caviar is one of these luxury goods, and I agree with Thomas Keller with this. You shouldn't just have a small amount, because you don't understand luxury ingredients when you have a small amount. I know this is a really sort of shishi approach to luxury ingredients, but eat as much as you can in big bites, right? It's like foie gras. Like, you'll never understand foie gras by taking a small bite. You have to take a massive bite to the point where, like, whoa, maybe I overdid it. Same thing with caviar. Big old bites, preferably unadulterated with very little ingredients. All right? So again, a big thank you to Courvoisier's Caviar for being here today. So who likes champagne? All right. So I'm going to tell you, so champagne is consumed very differently all around the world. When I was in Washington, D.C., much more conservative. People would have multiple, producers and vintages, and they took the time and they went through. And then I came to Aspen, and they have a very unique way to drink champagne. And we're really fortunate to have the head winemaker from Veuve join us to see, because she heard, Aspen is the largest consumer of Veuve Yellow Label of any other place in the country. I said, wow, that's a fun fact. And we found out the Little Nell was actually the #1 place in the country where we go through between the Little Nell and Cloud 9, if you had the opportunity to go visit this beautiful establishment, 1,000 cases, right, in a very small amount of time. That's a little disgusting, right? But to her surprise, very little champagne was consumed. People cover each other in champagne. So they looked at something about 80% of the Veuve Yellow Label they were selling, people were spraying, right? So what it tells us is it's a celebratory beverage, right? People drink champagne, they buy champagne to celebrate something. Because even though sparkling wine was discovered and figured out hundreds of years ago, we're still pretty enamored with bubbly wine, right? We all understand it's a pretty basic scientific recipe. yeast eats the sugar, shoots out gas. But for some reason, even when we see it poured, we get super pumped, right? Right? How much champagne have you consumed? But every time it comes out, you get super excited. So we've done an amazing one of marketing champagne, and we drink a lot of it, and they charge us a whole lot of money for it. So what we're going to do is do some housekeeping, make sure everyone understands different styles of champagne. And that's what I want you to go away with is, if you're going to order a champagne, at least understand the 3 or 4 basic styles so you can start there and then allow the sommelier to get the price point up as high as possible. Right? So champagne is very simply made with just a still wine. So if you're going to make a clear champagne, you start by just vinifying, let's say Chardonnay, right? A normal Chardonnay, fermented, stainless steel, the whole deal, okay? That basic sort of stainless steel fermented Chardonnay, which is made in a very cold region. If you've been to Champagne in the winter, it's absolutely bitter. It's not a beautiful place to be in the winter. They sort of barely even ripen grapes. The wines are so acidic and so insipid you would gag before you swallowed them. The acid's so high. So they put the champagne in the bottle, they add a little more yeast, a little more sugar, and they cap it off with a beer cap. After a few months, bubbles are created, and they go into solution, and that's how we get champagne, okay? In its basic form, that's how method champenoise champagne is made. It seems really simple, but it's a pretty cool beverage, right? All right? Now, after that, you have different styles you can produce depending on how much sugar you have in, right? So the first champagne, that's the one on the far left, right? That's our Blanc De Blanc, okay? Blanc De Blanc champagne, if you're a French major, white of whites, okay? So essentially, this is a white champagne made from white grapes, right? They make it really simple for you. That white grape in Champagne region is typically Chardonnay, right? Chardonnay is like the workhorse for wine everywhere else in the world, right? So Blanc de Blanc, typically 100% Chardonnay. And how about this? We should be drinking this, by the way. Don't just listen to me go on about nothing. Let's drink this. I want to see empty glasses. These are all really quality champagnes. So drink this. The thing about Blanc de Blanc champagne, it's really structured. Super high acid, really, really crisp. I like Blanc de Blanc champagnes for aperitif. Outside of having it with sort of salty, fresh caviar, I really enjoy Blanc de Blanc champagne by itself. Wakes up the palate, it's like lightning, right? It's like better than coffee in the morning, right? Gets you going, it's like boom, right? All right, so let's taste this. And that's our Blanc de Blanc champagne. Really, really crisp, high tone, really, really acid. Now what I want you to do is, while you still have this on your palate, is compare that to champagne number 2. This is Blanc de Noir, okay? White of blacks. All right, so this is a white clear champagne that's made from black grapes. Typically, that black grape in champagne is Pinot Noir, okay? But how does it come out clear? So if you cut a Pinot Noir grape open, it's clear just like the white grape. All the color comes from the skin of the varietal, right? So unless they smash those grapes and macerate it in, you get clear juice, but you get really, really rich clear juice. So if you've ever had a Pinot Noir, a glass of Pinot Noir, next to a glass of Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir is much more full-bodied, right? So let's taste that. It's going to come out much richer and much fatter on the palate. Right? This is probably my favorite style of champagne. Blanc de Noir is beautiful because it has enough acid to pair well with food, but it's also incredibly rich as well. The texture is there, sweeter, riper aromatics, much more full-bodied, and this is a great food champagne. So with that said, let's take that second bite. Okay? This was my preferred caviar, the Osietra from the line that we have today. To me, this caviar was the nuttiest, the creamiest, the richest, and had more sort of elements of flavor, more layers of flavor. It leads with the sort of saltiness, because that's what your palate's going to pick up first, and then that goes away very, very quickly, and then you get nutty, caramel, that sweet iodine like of the ocean sort of characteristic. This is my favorite caviar, okay? But also the Blanc de Noir is rich enough to sort of stand up to it as well and doesn't fall apart. Go back and taste the Blanc de Blanc with that. It's going to taste like water. And again, I always recommend comparative tasting. It's the best way to learn. Because if I give you this Blanc de Blanc, and then I come and spray Blanc de Blanc around the room and give you some Blanc Noir, you won't be able to compare it. Right? The Blanc de Blanc sort of tastes thin, really, really lean. So we tend to start with the Blanc de Blanc, and then we move on to a Blanc de Noir. Okay? And next after that, we're going to move into the rosé. So rosé champagne is, yes ma'am?
Could you explain the naming conventions of caviar?
Say again?
There are naming conventions of caviar.
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with the age of the fish and the species. There's a lot that goes into it. The beautiful thing I love about this caviar company is if you buy these little tins, which are, how awesome are these little pocket size, like travel size, you know? Look at these things. You know, you have you remember like it's like fun size candy bars? Like, you felt guilty eating like a whole candy bar, but you eat like 8 fun size candy bars. These are like amazing. Like, you have no problem polishing these off. They're like the best, right? So on the bottom of this canister, which is awesome, I love full disclosure because I like to geek out, I like to understand what I'm putting in my body, is the name, the species of the fish. You get all the information on the bottom of this can. I promise you I don't work for this company. I just think it's really awesome what they do. Maybe I should. But you get the species of fish on the bottom. A lot of it has to do with the age of the fish, right? So the older the fish, it goes from the Osietra, which is another name for Osetra. It's the same, just synonym for it. Sort of the medium grade, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? All right, I was listening this morning. To me, that's my favorite. I think bang for buck, that's. I mean, this is going to be a ridiculous statement, but that would be my everyday eating caviar, if that existed here in Aspen. Again, rosé champagne. Rosé champagne is fairly misunderstood. And what I mean by that is, I don't know if people actually understand how rosé champagne is produced, how the styles are made. There's so many different colors and styles of rosé champagne. I think Blanc de Blanc, there's a little variation with producer style and obviously with terroir and people's individual vineyards, but the style is very similar. Blanc de Noir, the same thing, but rosé runs the gamut. I have a much longer dialogue at the table when I talk about rosé, because oddly enough, it always starts with color, right? Which I think is a very odd thing. They go, well, I like a pale rosé. I go, okay. Well, not all the bottles you can see through, so I guess I gotta guess which one's pale if I haven't had it. I don't know this sort of pale. Or they like something rich and dense. There's 2 ways to make rosé champagne, okay? The very classic traditional manner is blending white and red wine to make a rosé. So typically, a classic cuvée, something like Dom Pérignon or Krug, will be somewhere between 75 to 80 to 90% Chardonnay, okay? And typically, only up to 10%, 15% max of Pinot Noir, right? Most people don't know that, right? So you're essentially drinking the same cuvée that you paid 40% less for, but just added a touch more of that Pinot Noir, okay? And if you have a great winemaker, it's true because rosé costs 3 times as much, right? I know because I price them up. I don't pay for them. But if you're a great winemaker, like I think Dom Pérignon does a phenomenal job. It's one of my favorite rosé champagnes. You actually do smell and taste the difference. You smell and taste that great, beautiful Pinot Noir fruit. But a lot of people do it the cheap way, and they take a normal cuvée and they buy 5% Pinot Noir, they add in a little bit more color, and wow, they can double the price, right? That's an amazing business model. That's what we call margins. Margins. But there's another way, okay? Something called Sommelier. Okay, so in French it means to bleed. Literally, if you were just to bleed out, they call it Sommelier. And what they do is, it's maceration. So they take those beautiful Pinot Noir grapes, and they macerate the skins in, and depending on how long they macerate it, you can get your beautiful little pale rosé, or something that's so dark, it's like sparkling red wine, right? And everything in the middle. So everyone go and geek out tonight when you go to a restaurant and go, I want a Sommelier rosé. But you have to say it that way, because then they take you seriously, and they know that you're very knowledgeable. But depending on the style, the application for the food is very different. I like Aubrey's style because they make a very rich style. It's very high. It is a blend, but it's very high in Pinot Noir. So let's smell and taste them real quick. So the first thing to know is way richer on the palate. The aromatics are that of a very light Pinot Noir. Lowest in acid, sort of bitter, right? Comes from that skin contact. So have that with the eggplant. What I really wanted to bridge here was the innate sort of bitterness of eggplant with the bitterness in this wine. You can go ahead and have the last bite. And a beautiful rosé champagne, especially if it's Sommelier, can be paired with something all the way up to sort of a roast chicken. You can go white meat with rosé champagne, right? If it lasts that long in the evening. I doubt that, but not at my house, but. What do you think? Amazing. Awesome, huh? So again, I challenge you to go back now and try the Blanc de Blanc if you have any left. That's the first one. it tastes like water, right? And then go back and taste the Blanc De Noir. It tastes a little bit richer. Extra credit points. Blanc De Noir is made from what grape? Pinot Noir. All right, they're listening a little bit. All right. Say again? Yeah, so we had a comment that the rosé isn't sweet at all. So typically, what people tend to do is they know the expectation of the consumer, right? At some point, people realize that a lot of times when people order rosé, anything rosé champagne, they're expecting a little bit more sweetness. And how they adjust that is after, right before the wines are corked and ready to be sold off, they add a little bit of simple syrup to it. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's the way champagne's been produced for hundreds of years. It's called dosage, right? Very, very classic term. So if you've ever seen those words on the bottle of champagne that no one actually really pays attention to, like brut, sec, demi-sec, things like this, right? Those are legal terms that decides how much simple syrup goes in. It's true, I didn't make it up. I'm not French, it's not my rule, all right? But that's the thing, right? So you can have a Blanc De Blanc champagne that tastes like this, very, very crisp. But if you see Blanc De Blanc demi-sec, it'll taste like a dessert wine, like Moscato, right? So that's an important thing to pay attention to, right? Is this a dry style? Is it an off-dry style, right? The French never make anything simple with wine. It could be so simple, right? What happened in California? It's like, I would like Chardonnay, and you just get Chardonnay. It's like, no, for them, it's all these rules and technicals. So this is much drier in style, and the reason is that Aubry adds almost no sugar, almost no dosage. 100% biodynamic. Also, we call it hippie farming. Everything's incredibly hands-on. He refuses to use any mechanization in the vineyard. It's all horses. So you go and you see this guy like on a horse in his vineyard. It sounds very romantic, but it actually does have an effect on the wine, except for just the cow manure in the vineyard. So champagne, right? We got champagne. We love champagne, right? Yes, please. So, good question. So why isn't there a vintage on this? Why isn't there a year? So Champagne went through a couple sort of phases when they were trying to figure themselves out, obviously a very long time ago. And they didn't know what was more important, to have a single vintage champagne or just to make something that was incredibly consistent, a house style. And it was Krug, the house of Krug Champagne, that said the multi-vintage wine is way more important because that's where we sort of see the talent or the technique of the blender, right? Because it's very easy to go, okay, we had a bad vintage, here's your vintage, it was really bad. Great, we're gonna charge you the same for it, right? But it's bad, right? So what they do is they make a small amount of vintage champagne only in the best vintages, but what they do is they keep large quantities of base wine under pressure from various different vintages going back to the 70s in these big pressurized tanks, right? And what they do is every year they go in with their blender and they blend a little bit of this, a little bit of 85, a little bit of 79, a little bit of 2011, a little bit of 2012, and they blend that all together to make what is the Krug multi-vintage champagne. And in their eyes, that's way more important than a vintage champagne, right? Vintage champagne obviously takes technique and skill to make a very good champagne, but it's way more difficult to make a style that's very consistent. So if you pick up a bottle of Krug today, and you pick up one that was bottled 5 years ago, the style is identical. Okay, and they keep these records of exactly what vintages and what percentages were blended in for decades. It's pretty cool. So that's why we have a non-vintage, or as Krug likes to say, multi-vintage, right? Way better marketing, I guess, than non-vintage champagne, because you want to have a consistent style. And also the multi-vintage champagnes tend to be a little bit lower in price point, so a little bit more approachable and something you can have on a daily basis. Okay. Now again, champagne is something. Yes, ma'am.
One more question about the rosé, just to make sure I
Please.
understand, because I love rosé champagne. So we have any percent from 15% Pinot Noir up to, is it 100%? Or how does that work?
Correct. Actually, it's less than 15% typically. I've seen as low as like 3 or 4%, all the way up to 100%.
So how do you judge a good rosé champagne?
How do you judge? So I'm not a big fan of quantifying like good or bad in wine. And I know that makes it even more complicated, but I think as a general wine consuming public, we should get that sort of those words out of our mouths. That's good, that's bad, that sort of thing. We should talk about what's different because we've sort of gone beyond just what's good and bad, right? We talk about the different styles, right? Because we're fortunate enough to try all these wines, right? Which is really cool. What's good or bad or what's better or worse, it's all about styles. So it's more about the dialogue of, is this wine something that's a blend? Is it a monovarietal, sort of Sommelier method, which a lot of Pinot Noir in? You're talking about just styles. So when, I always say the conversation you would have with a sommelier at a table is, okay, you want to start with, I want rosé champagne. And the skilled sommelier should say, what style do you like, right? Because there's very different styles. You should probably start with the left side of the wine list and not the right side. So the question should be, do you like sort of something pale, fresh, vibrant, which is typically going to be a blend, or do you want something really rich, dark, unctuous? Probably chances are you're going to have this with food. And that's the sort of dialogue you're going to have after that. But I will tell you, I don't know of a single low quality entry-level producer that makes the Sommelier method, because it's way more expensive, because Pinot Noir costs more. It should say Rosé de Sommelier. If I were a winemaker, I would definitely put it on the front. It typically is on the front because it's definitely a very expensive way to make rosé. Yes?
Quick question.
Yeah.
99 was looking at your grapes. If you had a vintage
Yeah.
made in 1990, would you expect that to be a lot better than most others?
What do you expect to be better than most others? So remember I said champagne. So the question was, a good vintage, would you expect the quality wine to be better than most others? And the easy answer is yes. But again, we get into the complicated world of quality of vintages, right? So we talked about champagne being cold. It's cold, it's bitter. In the summer, it's really gorgeous, right? Plump grapes, everything's romantic, harvest is about to come. But come, January, it's a really bitter place. So they get really excited when they have a warm vintage. So the rule of thumb is a great vintage in champagne is going to be a warm vintage, right? The wine's going to be richer, more full-bodied, and I wouldn't recommend drinking them when they're young, right? Have those after 10, 20 years. Champagne can age incredibly well. It's under a lot of pressure. It's very high in acid and can age for a very long time. We've been forced to have champagnes back to the 60s, 50s, things like that. They will age. Okay? Don't expect the wine to taste the same, right? It's just like a normal wine. It will become much more sort of honeyed and rich and round on the palate and way more complex, but you'll be rewarded with waiting. Yes?
Okay, so like you were saying earlier, like all of us tend to go, we want a pale rosé.
Uh-huh.
What you're saying is don't discount the darker rosés?
Yeah, no, especially if you're having it with food. Again, I don't like Rosé Sommelier just drinking by itself. I love Rosé Sommelier with food, right? Especially things that are sort of savory and earthy, mushrooms, roasted chicken, duck, right? Amazing with Rosé Sommelier champagne, right? And hopefully you're in a place that has both, because they're dramatically different styles and you should represent those on the wine list. Okay? All right. So what I want to touch on as well is you notice there's two sparkling wines that you have that are not champagne. Okay, and the reason I want to talk about that is while we love champagne, champagne is a phenomenal, magical beverage that I absolutely enjoy often. If you come to the Nell late night, you can see that I'm not in that camp alone. But there are a lot of other sparkling wines made around the world. Champagne was not the first sparkling wine in the world. They're just the ones who mastered the technique. Okay? So the first sparkling wine we're going to taste is a Cava next to that. Okay? So again, Champagne is a region in France. There's no other wine that should be called Champagne unless it's from the village of Champagne. Other than that, it's a sparkling wine, right? In the case of this is a Spanish sparkling wine called Cava. Okay? So Cava is a wine that Americans are really starting to discover now that champagne prices have gone through the roof, right? Not a cheap thing to drink. It's a luxurious beverage. So we're looking for alternatives, typically for something to drink around the house. You just want bubbles. Cava is a phenomenal go-to. So Cava is a region in northeastern Spain, okay, just south of the French border. And they make really, really phenomenal sparkling wines in the champagne method. So that method I told you, where you sort of make the normal white wine, put it in the bottle, re-ferment it, it's ready to go. That's called the champagne method. It's very expensive to do because you got to hold the wine for a number of years. Vintage champagne has to be held for 3 years before being released, right? Even Bordeaux doesn't do that, right? So Bordeaux buys, they're selling the wine after 6 months in barrel, right? En premier. Champagne, they can't even crack the wine. It's illegal. They can't sell it until 3 years. So major, major time commitment, right? So Cava goes through that same process. But the only difference is Cava's about a quarter of the price, right? So Cava, please taste that. What you notice, Cava has this really sort of fresh bitterness to it. It's absolutely delicious. It really reminds me of if you've ever had a Gruner Veltliner from Austria, same sort of bitterness, phenolic bitterness, really, really food friendly, absolutely delicious. This producer, Raventos, he really wants to get champagne a run for their money, right? So he goes, I charge a third of the price for twice the wine. That's his gimmick, right? That's not true, but except for the price part. The price part's true. It's a third of the price, but it's not twice the wine. But they use traditional varietals, right? So while you legally can use Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, they have all these crazy varietals that have been grown since the Roman times in northern Spain that are used to make these sparkling wines, and it's much more unique and super, super fresh. Again, Cava I don't think stands up to Champagne as far as weight and power and its ability to pair well with food, but as an aperitif, it's absolutely perfect. What do we think about the Cava? Super good. You know, I work a lot during food and wine. This is the most I drink the entire time, so I love these panels. It's awesome. I get back to the office and everyone's like, wow, you were really calm in that meeting. I was like, yeah, I wasn't really focused. I wasn't really focused. It's okay. I put the suit on. I'm professional by dinner time, I promise. Yes? Bobby Flay's a big fan of Cava? Oh, wow. Yeah. No, Cava's phenomenal. I mean, and it does range in quality. You can get anything from a Cava in a wine shop from $10 all the way up to about $50. Yeah. So speaking of Prosecco, the next one we're going to try is a Prosecco. Okay. Prosecco has this really, really bad image. Okay. And it's actually their fault. Right. It's one of these things where they realize they're like, well, we can sell this to people. They're going to drink this, and we can charge more than we would to Italians. So they started exporting a ton of it. And the area where Prosecco was originally allowed to be grown just kept growing. And as you can imagine, the Italians rewrote the laws and they kept growing. And they kept growing. And they go, wow, what's that appellation? Yeah, no, it's Prosecco now, yeah. You use red wine? No, we don't do that anymore. You do Prosecco. And it just kept growing, growing, growing until it was like this mass-produced wine that tastes mass-produced. Because mass-produced wine, it's not like I'm being like this snooty somm. Mass-produced wine tastes mass-produced. It's just a fact. Okay? And it tastes mass-produced, but there's been this resurgence of these families who have had holdings in these lands forever that are sort of retaking these lands and pointing out these are the best hillsides. Things that people never thought about. Single vineyard Prosecco, right? Why is that necessary, we thought, right? But the wines are absolutely gorgeous. I love Prosecco because it's not serious, right? I spend most of my day like analyzing wine, being really serious, talking about tasting notes, structure, talking about family histories, and at some point you just want a glass of wine, right? You know? And the great thing about Prosecco is it's just a glass of bubbly, right? There's nothing complicated about Prosecco at all. There's nothing that makes you think twice about it. You don't think there's no second layer. You know? It's like what you get in the glass is like that's Prosecco. That's it. Don't look any farther. There won't be anything there, right? But that's what Prosecco's about, right? It's about the simplicity and the joy of just drinking wine because it's wine and you just like drinking wine. Right? And you like getting a buzz, right? And that's enough, right? Prosecco, and they wouldn't be insulted by this, but Prosecco is, in my opinion, the best sparkling wine for mixing for cocktails, right? People always want to use champagne. Champagne is one of the worst sparkling wines you can use because it's too dry, right? So if you're having mimosas, use Prosecco. It's way better, right? Champagne's delicious by itself for breakfast, but with orange juice, it tastes sour. I don't care. It just doesn't taste good, okay? Use Prosecco, and guess what? You can drink more of them for the money. Right? You should be at least, right? So let's taste this Prosecco. And you're gonna laugh at me. I love Prosecco with little foie gras terrine, right? Everyone thinks about these syrupy sweet wines, but the beautiful thing about Prosecco is it's nice and off dry, so it's naturally a great pairing with foie gras, but it's got bubbles, so it cleanses the palate in between the bites, right? So next time you go to a restaurant, really insult the sommelier. When he comes over and he's like, can I recommend a Sauterne with your foie gras? You go, no, but I'd love a bottle of Prosecco, right? And they're gonna go, oh, okay, all right. And they're gonna go to the back and they go, table 42, God, I just ordered a bottle of Prosecco with this foie gras. Like, are you kidding me? It's like, thanks for the $30 sale, bro. But yeah, but it's delicious, right? You will, I can guarantee, we're talking about drinking ratio. If I put this entire room at a party and I put a case of Prosecco in the corner, and I put just a case of each of these champagnes, this would be gone twice as fast, right? There's something infinitely drinkable about Prosecco, right? When you take Prosecco, you make sparkling sangria, right? Instead of just normal white wine, use Prosecco, right? It's off dry already, it's super bubbly. I know it's not a Spanish wine, but you can find sparkling Prosecco around places in Spain where they're drinking this because it's already off dry, right? Awesome. And do we have any questions about the sparkling wine so far? I do.
So,
Yes.
go back to the rosé, the Sommelier rosé.
Yeah.
So my understanding
See, everyone's pumped about Sommelier Rosé now. Awesome.
My understanding of Sommelier
Yeah.
is that it's kind of a byproduct of wine production, right?
For red wine, yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
So my
Why is Sommelier Rosé more expensive than other? The easy answer is, if you are a producer that's not growing grapes, you have to buy the grapes. And the cost for quality Pinot Noir in Champagne is sometimes double Chardonnay. And the reason is Pinot Noir takes a long time to ripen. So it's a rarity to find a site or a vineyard in Champagne where it's warm enough and they get great exposure where they'll actually ripen the Pinot Noir fully enough to make a rich, unctuous rosé. So that's the reason why the expense is so high. Sommelier is definitely, so Sommelier, a lot of times producers that want to make really rich, like heavy red wines, they'll use this method, Sommelier, to pull off some of the light juice so you have a higher skin to juice ratio and these massive red wines, which are great date wines. I love them. But sometimes they take a little while to chill down and they're not the best when they're young. So they will sell this off as still rosé. Okay? But in the case of Champagne, there's very little outlet for still red wine. They do make still red wine in Champagne called Coteaux Champenoise, but no one wants to drink it, right? Because it's the same price as red Burgundy and that's much more tasty, right? So they have to use almost all their red grapes for sparkling wine, but again, they can't really ripen the grapes. So to find great Pinot Noir, it's super expensive. So brands like Boulanger that produce wines that are a lot of Pinot Noir, hence the expense, right? They also oak ferment their Champagne. So that's another thing to add as well. Just to name a few brands, Krug, definitely oak ferments, Boulanger oak ferments. So you're gonna pick up those sort of toasty, sweet, nutty aromas that you would get in a white Burgundy, for example, in the Champagne as well. It's a rarity, but it does happen, okay? Any other questions? Yeah?
So I noticed you picked 3 French varietals, and then a Cava and a Prosecco. Why did you not select an American?
That's a very good question. For me, I think the question was, why didn't we select an American sparkling wine? And the reason is, it's a very good reason, is American sparkling wine really does rival Champagne in a lot of places. So I wanted to show sort of a diversity of styles. But if you drink Roederer Estates or something like this, right, or Schramsberg, one of these great American champagnes, and you blind taste them, especially when they have age, when the fruitiness sort of dies out, the wines are absolutely spectacular, right? Unfortunately, these days they are charging the same price as Champagne. There was a great value where you can get like a bottle of Schramsberg Blanc De Blanc for like 20 bucks, and now it's like, like 60 bucks. They're super expensive, but I think American sparkling wines are absolutely incredible, and they really are delicious. I don't think we have the confidence yet in America to say that and really be comfortable pouring that at a really nice dinner at home, and being proud of that, but that day will come as well. Maybe when they like overly tax French wine. God, don't let that happen. Yes, yes. Yeah, so you can't call it Champagne. It would just be American sparkling wine, which is enough, right? It's a cool country, right? But there are a lot of sparkling wines, right? There are sparkling wines being made in an enormous amount of countries, right? Moët Chandon opened a huge winery in Argentina, right? They're going to be making sparkling wines in Argentina. I think they also invested in vineyards in northern India, right? It's like they're making sparkling wines all over the world, and they're absolutely delicious. It's just important for us just sort of try the different styles and know the differences. You don't have to like them. Right? This sparkling wines I don't like, right? But even the Cremants of France, right? If you see the word Cremant on a bottle of wine, which we've seen before, this is what that legally means. It means it's a sparkling wine from France that's made in the style of Champagne, but it's not from Champagne. So for instance, a Cremant d'Alsace, right? It's a Cremant, it's a sparkling wine from Alsace, made like Champagne, but literally like a quarter of the price. And those are phenomenal, phenomenal values, right? This just gives you sort of an example of some of the more classic styles. Is your question? That's a very good question. So we have a question about the type of glass to drink sparkling wine or champagnes from. And this has been very controversial lately, right? So the flute was always like the glass of choice, right? If you see it come on the table, you know it's a celebration. You're like, all right, I'm at a party, game time, right? Well, so I was content with that. And I had the opportunity to go to Champagne about 8 years ago, right before I moved to Aspen. And I visited Krug Champagne. And I walk out and they have like, it sort of looks like a small Burgundy bowl. And I go, wow, they make still wine too, cool. And I walk out, it was all Champagne. And they said, the Champagne flute should be outlawed, where they're really dramatic about it, right? Which I was like, come on, relax. You're selling the Champagne, right? What do you care what they drink it out of? But their whole point was, we spend so much time, energy, and money making these still wines that could rival something like a great Chablis or great Burgundy. We want to serve in the same glass so you can really enjoy it. So in their opinion, like sort of a small white wine glass or a Burgundy bowl is ideal. I've really fallen in love with a coupe, right? Because I don't care what anyone says, I still think drinking champagne is the occasion, right? It's like you don't really need a special occasion. You're not celebrating something. You're celebrating the fact that you're drinking champagne or you're drinking sparkling wine. It's like it's enough, right? What else do you need, right? You're alive, right? You're in Aspen, right? It's cool, right? right? So at the Now, we serve all of our champagne in coupes, and it's really awesome. You see people, the drunker they get, they start spilling champagne all over themselves. And you know what I mean? You're like, all right, well, cut that guy off. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. This is awesome. It's a great way to start my Saturday. And thank you to our caviar sponsor, Cavesias. Absolutely incredible. And remember the Osietra. That was my favorite. All right? You're going to have one tonight. And of course, most importantly, thank you to Lexus.